So a week after dominating on Sunday Night Football, Brock Purdy had his worst start as an NFL quarterback, a terrible, no good, awful day for him in Cleveland. And I would like to start by giving Cleveland's defense a lot of credit. There are some dogs on Cleveland's defense, no pun intended, coming out of the dog pound, but that team's good. That team's good. If they just had their quarterback who has the biggest guaranteed contract in the NFL stay healthy, that team could definitely go places. But what it means for the 49ers, so we talked about it. How would this team respond off of a loss? And in a weird way, as much as you don't want to lose any game, I think Kyle Shanahan is kind of okay with them losing this game. 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time game on the East Coast. I think that this is the type of game that Kyle Shanahan's okay with, like, you losing and hopefully building off moving into the future. What do you think of evaluating the Niners off a loss, and especially with Brock Purdy's performance in that game?
Well, let's put the Brock Purdy stuff aside real quick because, this game was a worst case scenario for the 49ers, not just because the rain, not just because Jake Moody missed 2 kicks, including the game winner, not just because from the start of the second half until the final 2-minute drill drive, Brock Purdy had 1 passing yard on offense. Besides all of that stuff, 3 of their stars all got hurt in that game. Deebo Samuel has a shoulder injury. Christian McCaffrey has an oblique injury. Trent Williams has an injury that I'm not exactly sure what it was, but there's talks that he'll be missing the next game against the Vikings as a precautionary measure. So, yeah, all those guys getting hurt in the same game is problematic for San Francisco because the entire foundation of that team is built around Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams and Brock Purdy now in a way that it wasn't even 12 months ago. So the injury part of it is much more problematic for San Francisco than it is the game result. In terms of the game, Brock Purdy was eventually going to have a bad game. I love that the week before, I'm here in Sacramento, so we have a lot of 49ers talk on our radio station, and I love that the conversation the week before from 49ers pundits and 49ers fans was, are the 49ers so good that they are hurting Brock Purdy's development? That was a real conversation that was being had. Are the 49ers just so damn good that it's hurting Brock Purdy's development? And it's a ridiculous thing to talk about because you want to support your quarterback with all of the skill position players and all of the schemes that involve motion and get people open. And Brock Purdy, his previous worst game was, I believe, an 88.6 passer rating in the playoff game against the Cowboys. For him to fall off a cliff and have a 53 game where he's playing bad, he threw his first interception and it was not the receiver's fault. It was an interception that was clearly Brock Purdy's fault. To get all of that out the gate and for them to still almost win a coin flip game, I feel like is important because now we are getting closer to having a representative sample size of what Brock Purdy is as a quarterback.
For what it is worth, Brock Purdy had a better day than Joe Burrow in week 1 against the same Cleveland Browns defense. He had a better QBR and passer rating than Joe Burrow against this Cleveland Browns defense that through 6 weeks has the lowest opponent's total yards per play, passing yards per play, and the best third down percentage in the league. Yes, again, this Cleveland Browns defense has just been insane through the early going here. But I actually left this game more impressed with Brock Purdy. I will say, because what he was able to do on that should have been game-winning drive, I think is exactly what fans have been calling for, to see how does Brock Purdy react when he doesn't have his fastball. How does he react when he has to put the team on his back and lead a game-winning drive? Well, we got the answer. He did enough on his part to get the 49ers in a position to win that game. The fact that you could have a game in which, as you mentioned, I think he had like a QBR in the 40s, and you still have an opportunity to win the game at the end. You usually can't ask for much better from your quarterback. The question is, I just look at John Lynch and I'm like, we really drafted a kicker with a top 100 pick and he misses the game-winning field goal. Misses 2 field goals in the game for what it's worth, but I give you a little bit of leeway when it comes to 54-yard kicks versus 41-yard kicks, and you're lined up dead center. I know Jim Harbaugh hyped up this guy, and I'm a big Jim Harbaugh guy, but Jake Moody, his last name was appropriate because I was in quite the mood after seeing him shank that kick. He went full shankopotamus, and until he starts consistently making those kicks again, I'm going to just start referring them as booty, because that kick was straight up booty. Like, I can't even lie about that one. That was very disappointing. And it is concerning because he was missing kicks in the preseason too. And I know preseason, a lot of people are happy to throw it aside, but when it comes to a kicker missing in the preseason, and then we start to see those misses come in clutch situations in the regular season, you don't get that many opportunities as a kicker to redeem yourself. And if this continues, I would not be surprised to see Jake Booty end up on an injury report with a quad injury and Robbie Gould stepping in out of nowhere as he just steps off the golf course pretty much to make clutch kicks.
I don't think Robbie Gould and the Niners are on good terms right now. So I think it might be Zane Gonzalez who slides in there.
You know what helps get people on good terms? $5 million. Usually that helps people get on good terms with each other.
Maybe there is a reparable relationship there. I don't know the details behind it. I just know Robbie Gould was a bit salty for how it ended when they talked to him at Lake Tahoe again on the golf course.
Robbie Gould was salty a couple years ago when they franchise tagged him and he was threatening to retire then. And then the Niners paid him and he was like, oh, okay, I'll come back. And then never miss a playoff kick for you, which, as much as Robbie Gould and his inability to go on kickoffs is frustrating, never missed a playoff kick. Good as gold. Robbie Gould.
Besides the kicker talk, because the solution for your kicker problem is have home field advantage in the playoffs. That will be the solution for the 49ers, because the Super Bowl's in a dome, and if you play every game at home, Jake Moody's never missed a kick on the home field.
Thank God the Eagles lost to the Jets this past Sunday. If it wasn't for that, my mood this entire week might have been vastly different, but the fact that the Eagles lost to the Jets helps me swallow this pill of a loss to the Browns that much easier.
Juju, can you say number 1 seed in the NFC, Detroit Lions? Because that's the world we live in right now. Number 1 seed, Detroit Lions.
I will say if the season ended today, it would still be the San Francisco 49ers with the 1 seed. But yes, if you look at Detroit's strength of schedule the rest of the season, it is concerning if you're either an Eagles or Niners fan, because the Lions, in theory, could coast through the rest of their schedule, end up with 14 to 15 wins versus the Eagles and the Niners, who both have to play a first place schedule. I mean, the Niners still got to take on the Bengals here in a couple weeks. They still have to take on a Buccaneers team that was tougher than expected. They have to take on the Eagles. The Eagles have to take on the 49ers, and the Cowboys still twice on their schedule. So yeah, if you're the Lions, and especially in the NFC North too, because again, get the Bears, get the Packers, get the Vikings, who have, without Justin Jefferson, very different from how they started the season. The Lions might be in cruise control for the number 1 seed at this point.
But I have good news for you. The Lions play in a dome, so we don't have to worry about Jake Moody missing kicks, because the Lions play in a dome.
And he gets to return to the state of Michigan, where all his family could be in the stands once again, like they were in Ohio, which maybe they're a curse. I don't know. I don't know if I put that on the Jake Moody family, but all I will say as a superstitious sports fan, don't attend the next game. Don't attend a game for the rest of the season. I'm just asking. I know it's just a personal favor to me, but please, for the love of God, just watch on your TV. Heck, the HD TV experience, come on. You get to see every angle. TV, way better than live action. Come on.
Okay, I don't want to get too far away from something that you also said that I want to comment on. I'm not walking away from that game more impressed with Brock Purdy than I was before, okay? Like, yes, the 2-minute drill was very good, and they got the ball in the field goal range, and Shanahan went conservative at the end and decided to just line it up instead of trying to get more yards. Yes, I understand that part. But that second half was really bad. And by the way, the only reason they were in that game was because of what was essentially a pick 6 by Diamador Lenore. Like, I know JP Mason had to punch it in from 5 yards out, but essentially a pick 6 by Diamador Lenore was the reason they were even in that game in the first place. This was a classic quarterback isn't up to snuff. We got a couple injuries on offense, so our defense is going to keep us in the game, right? Think that playoff game against the Packers a couple years ago in the frosty snow of Green Bay, where they have a blocked punt and a blocked field goal and an interception, and it's like our defense and special teams keep us in the game. Good on the 49ers for doing that. Like the Fred Warner interception, the Demo Lenore interception, those were key plays that kept them in the game against a quarterback on the other side that had a worse passer rating than Brock Purdy. So Defense was the reason the Niners were in that game in the first place. Offense was out there costing them the game. It's fine. It happens. It happened a lot for the 49ers with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just weird that they now find themselves in the position to have this, despite the fact that people have become so accustomed to them winning every single week and them winning by a lot. It's the first time with Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey that they've been in this situation, which surprisingly has been a whole year. So it's been a whole year since the 49ers fans have had a chance to complain about our offense is letting us down, but our defense is keeping us in the game. It was just one of those days, man. The defense kept him in the game. Demo Lenore's, I've been calling it a pick six. Essentially, pick six was the reason they were still in it. And just because it came down to a coin toss field goal is not indicative of the Niners at all. It doesn't mean they're not a good team. Doesn't mean they're not still the best team on paper in the NFC. They just lost a weird game.
Yeah, again, if this was a game that you had to chalk up as a loss, you're okay with it. It's out of conference. It's an irregular start time for a West Coast team. It's against the best defense in the league that it's looking like. The Browns have established themselves as that. You missed some of your star talent. Your kicker was off. And you even got a little bit hosed by the refs late. I mean, that Tashawn Gibson helmet call was arguably one of the worst of the season so far. And certainly one that will stick in the brains of most Niners fans for a while. If anything, again, I think Kyle Shanahan's okay with this one because I don't think he wanted the undefeated talk to carry on too long into the season either. For what it's worth, and as much as I would love to see it, I think every fan would love to see it at some point. I think most coaches and players, they view the undefeated talk as a little bit of a distraction, a little bit of a thing that allows players' heads to get too big. And you don't like that going into a postseason, typically, because that kind of allows you to be exposed. And obviously it puts the hunted tag on you more than it would normally going into a playoff situation. So I guess for what that's worth, the perfect season talk was short-lived going into week 7. But at the same time, I do think that Kyle Shanahan and company, they're actually okay with it being over with. I think, heck, if you even asked the Philadelphia Eagles locker room, they're probably okay with it as well. It's just one less thing to have to think about throughout the course of the season. I don't know.
The Philadelphia Eagles had like a team meeting in the locker room afterwards and talking about we all need to be better. So I don't know how okay the Eagles were with losing that one.
See, the big problem here, of course, is when you are in such a dead heat with the Eagles, you would have liked the ability to separate. Again, that's why you would have loved Jake Booty to actually make that field goal at the end. Because even in your worst week, you would have still been 6-0 and the Eagles would have fell to 5-1. You have a game advantage. Maybe you actually beat them in Philadelphia later this year and basically you secure a home field advantage in early December. But now that you guys are both even and you still have the Cowboys technically behind you by a game, even though you at least have tiebreaker over the Cowboys, that's not as desirable a position as you would like in playoff seeding, as you mentioned, when playoff seeding may become more of a factor later on because you don't want to play in Philadelphia. And I think you would obviously prefer to be playing in fair weather, San Francisco, Santa Clara, whenever playoffs do roll around.
Well, the good news is that the Eagles have a primetime game this week against the Miami Dolphins, and you guys have a primetime game this week against the Minnesota Vikings. So I think that's a separation factor there. Minnesota is, last time I checked, trash. And so even if you don't have Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel or Trent Williams, which, by the way, it's looking like that might be the case. People are saying like they might hold them out because of the turf field and the extra week of rest going. They have a late bye week this year, so they can treat this as like a secondary bye week. Yeah, I think that might be the game plan for the Niners in terms of the healthy players. The entire purpose of the regular season for them is to get healthy for the playoffs. We know they're going to win the NFC West. We know they're going to have a top 3 seed. Just make sure everyone is healthy when you get to the playoffs, because that top 3 in the NFC, and yes, I'm including the Detroit Lions. My body is rejecting it, but I am including the Detroit Lions. That top 3 in the NFC is going to be very, very tough. And while Kyle Shanahan is probably more mildly annoyed at not being undefeated, like he would have liked to have been undefeated, but also would have liked not having the undefeated talk part of it. So while he's mildly annoyed that they're no longer undefeated, yeah, San Francisco's still clearly on paper by all the nerd stats, the best team in football. even with a loss, because again, no one is undefeated in the NFL at this point. No one left is perfect. So San Francisco is the best team in football. They have proven they are the most talented team on paper, and therefore they just need to make sure they are healthy. So they'll beat the Vikings walking ass backwards. And even if they don't have Trent Williams, don't have Deebo Samuel, don't have Christian McCaffrey for that game, they still should be okay. And man, I can't wait for Eagles and Niners, because honestly, the Eagles might be the Niners' biggest rival right now. Like, it's Niners, Eagles, Niners, Eagles, Niners, Eagles has been the whole conversation. I can't wait for that game to come around in a few weeks, because we know those two teams are good. And an NFL that from like team 7 to team 24 feels like everyone is exactly the same. We know that the Niners and Eagles are really good, and it's going to be really exciting to watch them play each other in I think first week of December.
Well, how did you interpret Brock Purdy's performance on Sunday? Were you more impressed like me, less impressed like Kyle, or it's just somewhere in the middle, lukewarm? Like to hear your thoughts. How do you think the Niners respond off a loss? Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias. From Juju and Kyle. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.